Welcome back. Our session for today is Astronomy in Ladakh, a lens on both the sky and the ground. A discussion between Raghu and Anmol, moderated by Padma Rixin. Raghu is a journalist and a writer, and recipient of Yale's 2019 Wyndham Campbell Prize for Nonfiction. He is the former chief of bureau at TheWire.in and the author of Farthest Field, an Indian story of the Second World War. Anmol is an educator and a filmmaker, most recently at the United World College in Pune, where he also taught philosophy and film courses. He has worked on the cinematography of Hindi, Marathi, and international film projects and helped write and produce a documentary on film cultures of India. Padma Rixin is presently a PhD scholar at IIT Delhi. His research interests are traditional knowledge, village studies, everydayness of being Ladakhi, and interaction of Ladakh with more extensive social forces like state, nationalism, development, capitalism. Join Raghu and Anmol as they converse on astronomy and Ladakh and the astronomical efforts in context of the current tensions at the border.
Jule, salam, and hello everyone from the windy, dry, cold season of my homeland, Ladakh. I'm excited and honored to moderate this session. We'll be in conversation with our extraordinary guests, Donpo as we call in our mother tongue, Raghu Kannad and Anmol Tiku. We'll be discussing an article co-authored by Raghu and Anmol, published by the New Yorker magazine. The article is titled as "The Clear Night Sky Over India and China's Hostile Border." It is a wonderfully written piece. There's an undercurrent of care and hope in this article. But to put it very simply, the article is about the Hanle Telescope Complex and Mera experimental solar telescope located in the Changthang region of Ladakh. But it is much more than that. For one, the article through the telescope shows us the cultural and ecological life of Changthang. The article introduces the notion of right to starlight. And thirdly, we are shown the possibility of a healthy relationship with our neighbor China through astronomy diplomacy. And lastly, and most importantly, as Raghu and Anmol make us ponder over the tension between conventional development and more gentler ways towards the future of Ladakh. And without wasting too much time, let's just dive into our conversation. And let me ask a very direct question. Why you guys decided to work around astronomy for writing this article or for your larger project on Ladakh? Or in other words, what took you to Changthang?
Thank you, Padma, for that really generous introduction. I guess it's it would be appropriate to say that we had been thinking about visiting Hanle for almost a decade. We had heard about these set of telescopes in maybe 2011. And we never got the chance. It never happened. Although I had been to Ladakh in between, without Raghu. But having been to Ladakh once and kind of marveled at the extraordinary night sky when I was there, it was we spoke about it. We said, okay, what's happening? With this set of advanced research institutions going there and building these telescopes, because that's not what you hear about when you hear about Ladakh from the mainland. Last year in 2019, Raghu and I, we went and we discovered that there was a lot more to these places, Hanle and Merak, than we had gleaned, and there was a lot more happening. With the astronomy and with the people and the place. So we decided to kind of look deeper into it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, I should say thank you for your introduction, Padma. That you're obviously the kind of reader that we were dreaming of having. You know, you really picked up on the things that we wanted to say that are sometimes reduced by the editing of an international, story. But coming back to Hanle, so we arrived in Hanle, and of course, what one finds there is a very remarkable technical facility and a remarkable kind of scientific infrastructure, which is doing some stuff that's very cutting edge, and we spend a lot of time learning about science just to be able to follow what the technicians and the scientists say. Studying gamma rays and all kinds of different frequencies on which you can explore the universe through a very clear sky. But in addition to the technical marvel of what was happening there, we were really struck by how related that was, how interconnected that was with the social life of the place. And that began with the fact that everyone we met in Hanle or in Merak was from Ladakh, if not from those villages themselves. This is like a policy that the Indian Institute of Astrophysics has had to recruit locals and to train locals to become the personnel for these sites. And so that automatically meant that these telescopes were not just located in Hanle and Ladakh, but they belonged to the community in a way that was different. So even people who were not astronomers per se, who might have been engineers or technicians or even less skilled staffers, were very invested and engaged with what was going on there. Not to mention with the prospect for what happens, what's possible in the future. So that is the first thing that struck us, is that this enterprise of astronomy in Ladakh is one that's quite rooted. I can't comment on exactly how deeply rooted, but it has roots that seem like they have a lot of potential to grow. Yeah.
Thank you for what I'm reading is that you got to see the connection between astronomy and the social and cultural life in Changthang, and that's where we always tend to negate the interconnection and try to see things in concrete categories, but for now, I'm changing the direction of our conversation. I want to take us to the process of writing. Whenever Ladakh is being or being wrote about or being shown in TVs, films, advertisement, there are many stereotypes and cliches about Ladakh. And one of the stereotypes that we often hear about is from the geopolitical perspective, that it's a territory that needs to be protected, and people and the culture gets and the wildlife gets subsided in this stereotypes. And there's this another stereotypes of the people of Ladakh being poor, backward, something that needs to be pulled out and developed in the conventional economic sense. And there's this more recent stereotype of Ladakh, in which we see Ladakh as a ethical, captivating, exotic place, and this serves our tourism industry. But guide us through the process of writing, how you negotiate it through these cliches.
So, Padma, thank you for again pointing this out, because this actually, in some ways, was the centerpiece of how we were thinking about writing this article. Right at the get go of the article, we are setting up this kind of two very different images, right? Ladakh being at the crossroads of historical crossroads, and even currently at crossroads of lots of things happening geopolitically, trade, and so on, and at the same time being described or seen, consumed by the world as a buffer, a border, and a battlefield. So this tension between seeing this place as a remote in space and in time, and only as a buffer or a border, and seeing this place as in through the lens of relationships between other people, other places. We were really intent on focusing on the relationship. What is our relationship between this place? As travelers to coming there and kind of seeing it, and as how it has been kind of consumed. It became really important for us to kind of, in the writing process, bring attention to the fact that it's not completely barren, right? Hanle, like the most obvious thing when you go there is that, yes, maybe there are lots of plains and they don't have, greenery. But as soon as you enter Hanle, the area around the observatory, you see it's a thriving wetland. And so changing that imagination itself was important for us. Or when we are talking about Merak, talking about that this is not some kind of an abandoned, observatory on the lake edge. There's a thriving village nearby where there were, lush fields of barley, and people are actually, cultivating and having their own economy. So in our writing process, we had to keep resisting the urge for that kind of cliched, beautiful, and oftentimes true description of a certain part, but to make sure that that doesn't become the only reality that's communicated, because that obviously has certain kinds of, propagates certain stereotypes and does not allow us to see the complexity of what is happening in that place, what is being done by people like us or from outside, and what is being done by people within that context.
Yeah. So let me jump in there. So exactly. Now, when Anmol and I we were traveling there last year in 2019. We were engaged in a longer term project with the IIA. But earlier this year, when we began writing the article, part of what motivated it was that the Galwan Valley skirmishes had just happened, and also the skirmishes on the northern bank of Pangong Lake. So suddenly, all the national attention was focused on Ladakh, and we were seeing it through a bunch of images. We were seeing it through these phone videos shot by soldiers of the of the melees. We were seeing it through these digital topographies that have been rendered in news studios, and especially in the digital topographies, which were very high tech. You don't get, what you see is essentially a kind of a battlefield. You see something that doesn't reflect social life, that doesn't reflect natural life, that doesn't show agriculture, that doesn't show pasture, and essentially somewhat dehumanize. It turns it into what I would call terrain, pure terrain. So we were remarking on that, because on the one hand, you're seeing these images of the northern bank of Pangong, which is pure terrain, whereas we had just been on the southern bank of Pangong, and we were kind of luxuriating in the wonderful ecological and kind of social life there. So it was kind of, it did strike quite hard that for any writing or journalism, one of your aims is to defeat stereotype. And especially when you're writing about an area that is categorized as marginal or remote, then it's more important to defeat stereotype. In this case, it was really apparent that a stereotype serves a certain violent purpose. It basically serves war. And so to if you want, and to sort of like reveal Ladakh as more than just terrain is also to speak against possibilities that are more than just war, and which is something that I think Ladakh deserves to be seen as a place that has a potential for more than just war or standoff. So that again connects back to the astronomy, because the ecosystem that the natural life that we discovered, the natural and the social ecosystem, is something that we discovered that speaking for myself, I was as surprised by last year. So the writing of this article involved, first of all, challenging the stereotypes that I myself was tempted to write. So it was useful doing this as a co-writing this with Anmol, because I wrote the first draft, and his first edit of my draft was largely checking my own tendency to provide these stereotypes of Ladakh to an international audience, to talk about, to focus on certain things and to ignore certain equally true things. And in particular, it's to focus on the image of the mountainous, remote being a key word, isolated, and the mystique of this remote edge of the world, which we might like to conjure up for its imaginative power and excitement. But it's not actually true for anyone who lives. If you live in Ladakh, it's not the edge of the world; it's the center of your world.
Thank you. I just want to point out that it's very humbling to and also very nice to hear that you took care to think how to write about Ladakh, and also when we write about other communities, other in inverted commas. So I just wanted to add one point to Anmol's point that adding to his point that landscape, even how do we see a landscape, even the most desertest of deserts, imagine Sahara or Atacama desert, but even there is life, it is not devoid of life. There are snakes, lizards, and even in Ladakh, the most barren of all places, we see from a human-centric perspective, and we tend to say there's a barren land, but it's thriving with land. And even at Khardongla, one of the highest places in the earth, it will have so many grass in August and October. It will be almost green if you go there. So and also adding to Raghu's point that a particular conception of a community or a landscape has purpose. I just want to if we see women as embodiment of care, women of love, of motherly feelings, then the idea behind this characterization of women is to restrict them within the domesticity of a household. So even then, so even when Ladakh is if it's seen only through the security lens, then it would be to only protect and defend or expand the territory, and the people get subsided. And if we are to, I feel very irritated by this. The present projection of Ladakh as exotic, mythical, and all. And as both of you pointed out, in what we lose in all these stereotypes and cliché is the lived experience of a community. But you will see that we Ladakhi don't wear the peraks every time and don't dance around everywhere. We live in this community, in this region, and presently it's also tough. It's beautiful, but it's not mythical and happy place. Presently, the temperature has touched minus 13 last night, and it was very. I am a nocturnal person, and I was not able to write for last 2-3 days. So it's the living here, the process of living, of being Ladakhi at the crossroad, as the Literature Fest theme shows, is tough. It's also happy. We live in the moment. It's a process. Living is a process, and cliches and stereotypes tend to categorize and rigidify the life world of the Ladakh and of the Ladakhis and Ladakh. Now I am speaking too much. Now I'm again changing the tracks and want to come to the process of selections of the photo. But before that, let me tell you that this article is a visual treat to read. Right? I did not read on a big screen on a laptop, but I read it on my mobile phone. But even then, the article just starts with a very beautiful image of the sky, of Mars opposition. And then as the story progresses, as the story reaches a point, then there's another appropriate image. The story, the write up and the images intermesh, and there's a nice combination there. And I saw that most of the photos are credited to Acho Dorje Angchuk, who is the chief engineer at the Hanle complex, and one photo is credited to Anmol. So and again, what was the process of selection of photos for this article?
Yeah, I think we tried to actually we knew that this was going to be a visual story, because it's very hard to write about Ladakh and people without like giving people both metaphors in writing, but also images, because it's something that people almost expect. But we also wanted to play around with that expectation. We just didn't want to kind of again reinforce certain ideas. The obvious thing is that we wanted to bring attention to what the possibilities these telescopes what possibilities these telescopes had, and that the kind of night sky that we in cities, and in urban areas across the world, we have no idea of like what a pristine night sky, a clear night sky looks like. Of course, the photographs are processed and maybe it's not visible to the naked eye to the same extent, but it was to actually whet our appetite for what we have done to our lives as we have flooded them with light. For me, at least, the experience of like going to Ladakh for the first time was like emerging out of a blindness of light and fog from my urban life, and kind of seeing, oh wow, there is an entire universe out there. But when it comes to people photographs or like places, it was imperative for us to actually kind of again show that Hanle, it might be at the near the border area, but it was a trading post. It's like the place where Senge Namgyal died. There is an entire history and a flow of people and things that has happened through this place over hundreds of years. And we were really eager to avoid the thrill of Ladakh kind of set of pictures, right? Like it's not about us as tourists coming out there for adventure and seeing these like sharp, jagged mountains, or these ravines, but to show local people, whether it's the monks themselves who had like traveled to Hanle Monastery. They were traveling within Ladakh and they were kind of curious about the monastery, or to show the context in which these observatories were, that there were villages around them, there was a wetland around them. So that again, we are challenging those stereotypes. And for me particularly, while I was working on this photo selection, it was really, really important that we don't only challenge the stereotypes for outsiders, but we also challenge the stereotypes that we have internalized. Like it's not as if there aren't, people in Ladakh don't see that there is greenery around them in the Sham Valley or in like, Hemishupachan or these areas, or that in Leh, it's not always like a pretty sight. There is a landfill right next to it. We are choosing to ignore certain parts of reality because we have actually internalize these stereotypes, and we have basically kind of given strength to the larger forces that sell those stereotypes to us. So and that's the same thing is true for the idea of Ladakh being little Tibet, which is the exotic kind of thing that you're pointing out. Like there is a lot more happening. You go into markets in Leh and there are different kinds of people who are trading. I was lucky enough to meet Abdul Ghani Sheikh, who was one of the founding members of the Central Asian Museum. And he himself spoke about his experience as a Ladakhi, which is not as a Buddhist Ladakhi, but as something else. And so for us, the images became a way of kind of again bringing attention to those things that we thought that are often ignored, or around which there are other stereotypes.
Yes, and it also, and that also sort of brings us to the central drama of our story, and of not just of our story, but that is actually manifest in those observatories, which is that the perfect night sky above Ladakh exists, but it doesn't exist, inviolably forever. That night sky is not a can't be reduced to a cliche either, because there even in Ladakh, even in Hanle, there are threats emerging, and some are quite serious, to the quality of the night sky. And so the story sort of eventually hinges on a solar power development that the central government has planned for the Hanle plain, and what a threat that poses to the quality of the night sky there, and therefore to the basic existence of the observatories. So so the images, we wanted the images to quite obviously capture the sheer splendor of a perfect night sky, which is what Dorje did for us, because he's also an astrophotographer. But that image is also then a door onto, to understanding that we see that only because the dark sky is something that exists, and that too is an ecosystem. The dark sky is not just is not to be taken for granted. It's part of an ecosystem, which is the ecosystem of Ladakh's atmosphere, and that is connected to what's happening on the ground. So to put it very pithily, we realize that from those places, you go there and you see that your ability to see stars millions and millions of light years away is connected to the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is connected to the ground. And so the village and the ecosystem and the sky and space are all really linked in very meaningful ways. And that's that's the essence of what we discovered when we went over there, which is that these observatories are not just a lens through which we get to look up at the sky, but they're also a valuable lens through which we get to look at what's happening on the ground. And this powerful idea that Dorje and others are advocating for right now, which is that that Hanle be designated and developed as a dark sky sanctuary, which would be the first dark sky sanctuary in India, and one of the largest and most pioneering dark sky sanctuaries in Asia. This is something that's just underway. Was absolutely captivating and exciting for us, but also seemed, so necessary too. So all of these things suddenly concentrate in the possibilities of this sanctuary, the stars, the sky, what that sanctuary would also mean for the amazing wetlands on the ground below that sky, the observatory, the communities who work in that observatory, and how the observatory works for them, and how all these things are interrelated, and how the dark sky sanctuary is essentially one powerful proposal for keeping them all growing together.
Padma, if I may, I wanted to add that actually part of this dark sky initiative, as Raghu pointed out, and also our writing process was a lot about actually listening to people on the ground who already have lots of different ideas. And and that's why, as you pointed out, that Dorje's photographs, like, of course, like he's a good astrophotographer, but it was also important for us to see that these things are already happening. Locals are doing and thinking about their place because this is a home for them, right? Rather than as some kind of like exotic remote location. So it's really imperative that when we go beyond these stereotypes, when we actually start listening, there are already things happening on the ground that can give us lots of different possibilities as against the more kind of cliched images. And if we can actually encourage those voices or like support them in any sort of way, we were only all too eager to. And that's where our article ends, with the voice of Dorje telling us, like, look, even with the India-China question, like, look, they are doing something across the border, we can do it, and there is something for us to be gained from it, rather than just get frozen in this.
And thank you. And this was the reason why I said that this article has an undercurrent of hope and care. That the possibility of advocacy for dark night sanctuary gave us at least hope that the reckless development that is being touted out throughout India and by the administration, we are being cautioned here. But I also थोड़ा सा sad हूँ मैं कि this notion of dark night century लद्दाख में इतना मतलब it's heartening to know that locals are involved and council is in the know of the things, but ये लद्दाख में इतना popular नहीं था. In fact, I read about this only when I read this article. That is only 2-3 months back, and unfortunately, very unfortunately, the solar power project is going ahead. Both of you pointed out that Leh is it's not only that night sky is not permanent, and also you mentioned about the landfill in Leh. It would have been nice. I am just thinking that if there was a photograph of the landfill in the article, then it would have brought the complexity of what we are talking about. And also a bit about internalization that from so many years, I think it began in the academic world in Tibet studies, because Tibet was not available for the researchers, and so they studied Ladakh as Little Tibet, and they exoticized Tibet, and it also played into the hands of projecting Ladakh as a Buddhist region. And Anmol just pointed out that Ladakh is a multi-religious community, multi-sect community, multilingual community. There's lots of complexity in it. But however, this exoticization of Ladakh has been internalized, uh, and although there are different political difference between Kargil and Leh, but they are in मतलब एक साथ आ जाते हैं प्लेटफॉर्म में कि so the idea from the Kargil is that we are lagging behind in exoticized Kargil. No, we have to. Matlab, this is how I am reading the thing. We are lagging behind, and similarly, politics around religion is the same thing. That we lagged behind the Buddhists to catch up politicizing religion, and now we are doing it. But that's a controversial statement I'm making here. But again, we'll go. I want us to talk about the future of Ladakh, and because in the article, एक tension between there's this थोड़ा सा pastoral life के बारे में भी बात किया जा रहा है कि old ways of life, and there's also the hope from Sanjay Kundu and others that new employment are coming. And also Anmol in the very beginning talked about how locals थी astronomy observatory में काम कर रहे हैं. तो how could we imagine the way forward for Ladakh?
So, Padma, like I think the solar power situation, for example, in the Khaldo Plains is an interesting thing. We don't need to go far to like Leh and Kargil. That actually, when we were in Hanle, we found out that a lot of the communities, the villages, they only had become permanent settlements in the last 30 years. Otherwise, a significant portion of the people, the Changpas in that region, were pastoral. Now, the Khaldo Plains might look like for some people like they're just empty. But if you actually spoke to the pastoral communities, because when we were there were pastoral settlements all over. You would realize that that place there is a lot of stuff going on. So I think for us, it is not just about like simply putting it in the Buddhist Muslim category, Leh, Kargil, but even between Leh and Hanle, there are different communities. There are things happening on the ground, and if we come up with a top-down approach, where it's basically coming as a farman from top that this is what we are going to do, then we are going to miss out on what is happening in that place for those people. And for us as people coming into this place, we just realized there is always more than whatever happening, than whatever story or image that you're carrying. And suddenly those Khaldo plains that were, that looked at first glance to be barren, turned out to be flooded with sheep, and turned out to be like homes to people. And there's an entire ecosystem and economy there that exists. The question is, and I think for us, the article was a way of saying, hey, we need to be listening to Stans and Tundo. We need to be listening to Dorje. We need to be listening to different Chankla communities. How do we get the conversation going? It's not about saying this is the answer, but we are missing some serious dialogue with people who are occupying that place, who are living in it, who have been doing it for a while, and as to what are the ways in which they can change, they want to change, and what are the things that they want to maintain, right? And I think that is really, really important to foreground.
Yes, exactly. And in addition, those voices are also providing us with creative answers, which the Dark Sky Sanctuary is one example of. Which I really doubt that anyone in a ministry in New Delhi was likely to come up with, and that was what was amazing for us, which is that there's an answer that really feels holistic, that feels sustainable, and that that really I would say it dignifies the place that it addresses in many ways, including by treating this part of India as a place where advanced scientific research and investigation can happen. The people there as being people who can participate in sophisticated research and help to ask, cosmic questions. These are all things that are otherwise well outside the imagination. So if you're not actually going and listening to those voices, then we lose the best solutions, clearly.
And I'm afraid to say that we are running out of time. And I am hoping that I did not hijack the talk. I did not impose myself in the talk.
Not at all. Next time we are going to interview you.
And to wrap this up, to bring together the major points, I think one of the major points that came through the conversation is that that reality is complex. That we need to go beyond or read between cliches to understand it, to work through it, and to imagine its future and to work towards its future. And because Ladakh is being written and represented so much these days, we also need to be to write with a care and concern. And last point is that for astronomy's sake, for Changthang's sake, for Ladakh's sake, and might I include for the sake of whole universe, we need to think whether the current process of top-down development is the right way forward or not. And the last word would be, how do we listen if mainstream development is not the right answer? Thank you very much. Thank you, Anmol. Thank you, Raghu, for the wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Padma.
Thank you.